Good afternoon, everybody. You have made it to the User-Centered Zoning webinar in the Emerging Resilience series presented by General Code. Thank you all very much for spending time with us today. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Wayne Childs, Director of Technical Solutions at General Code. I've spent the majority of my time at General Code specializing in developing intelligent ways to meet the unique code access needs of planning, building, and zoning professionals, along with the ultimate users of those codes. So this topic is very dear to my heart. It's been a personal mission of mine to make sure that the users of all of our codes understand how the codes affect them, their lives, and their property. And I think it's very important to everybody that's taken the time out of their day to be with us for this webinar. In addition to focusing on innovative solutions in publishing technology, I'm also a planning board member in my hometown and an active member of the American Planning Association. I've presented several sessions, the American Planning Association. So it's definitely a pleasure to do this again. My colleague Jeannie Sanders will be on the webinar today to assist me in fielding questions and keeping the webinar running smoothly. We have a fair amount of valuable concepts and solution examples to cover in today's webinar, so we'll reserve a time for Q&A at the end of the session. So please try to hold questions until then, but if you're experiencing any audio or video problems or have any urgent questions, please feel free to use the question pod to bring those questions to our attention, and we will try to address them. Looks like we're good to go. So let's get started. The topic is zoning, and it all basically started with New York City, as many things do. The 1916 zoning resolution in New York City was passed in response directly to the construction of the 42-story Equitable building in Lower Manhattan. The Equitable building literally swallowed up every available inch on the lot and cast a shadow on everything else in the neighborhood. So up until that time, communities grew rather organically, but once the size and scale of the buildings in New York City took off, some remedies were definitely needed to make sure to protect the rights of neighbors, to make sure the quality of life was balanced with the development of the city. So the regulations set specifications for new construction, such as height restrictions, minimum room sizes, and setback distances. As we've evolved in our zoning regulations have become increasingly complex and sometimes difficult for property owners to understand and interpret. Many of us who are spend a significant amount of time in our professional lives dealing with zoning code, we struggle with it from time to time, I think it'd be fair to say. So you could only imagine people who have very little understanding of the code itself find these codes incredibly intimidating. So let's take a look at a quote from Mike Ernst, Director of Planning at the Municipal Art Society of New York. And he says, to understand zoning, you have to have a law degree. It's so convoluted and so dense. The whole process of how buildings get built these days is so confusing and opaque to people. There really should be more transparency so people can have an understanding of what the future holds for their city. I think it's really important to keep in mind that is all of our mission. If we have anything to do with the creation or the administration or the communication of code, we really have to make sure that the people who benefit ultimately from this code can actually understand it. So that brings us over to the concept of user-centered design. User-centered design permeates everything in successful businesses. Everything from creation of mission statements to brand identity, product development, marketing, sales channels, client interactions, everything. This permeates everything, really keeping the user at the center of what we're doing. This solution involves people, process, and technology. It always involves these three. So people in this case, we're talking about residents, constituents, who are customers. We really want to adopt this, this business focus in serving constituents. User-centered government is well underway and has become quite the topic. And we're seeing many municipalities all across the United States adopt these user-centered government principles. This is closely related to user-centered design in the commercial world. This has successfully been embraced by retailers and direct-to-consumer companies all around the globe. So user-centered government, it involves many different roles. So developers, residents, plan commissioners, elected officials, realtors, business owners, staff, local government is in the business of promoting the public good. Plans and zoning codes tend to be intimidating and hard to decipher, even for staff. So you can imagine a private citizen, especially a homeowner, somebody that's not even a developer or realtor who does this in their work every day, but a homeowner understanding how code affects their property. And especially in these times we find ourselves in, where people find themselves pivoting professionally. They may decide to go into business for themselves, working out of their homes, having home offices. This is a particularly hot topic right now with what we're dealing with in regards to the pandemic. There are many people who are looking at repurposing or reusing properties for things they never had before. Things like, ADUs, bringing different family members to live on their property in smaller buildings on the properties. So many people are looking at zoning codes in a very different way in dealing with the pandemic and rebounding from the pandemic. For far too long, resident customers have accepted lackluster performance from government. And if you stay on top of it and look online at some of the things that are out there, that's no longer acceptable. People aren't willing to not be able to understand the laws that apply to them and ordinances that apply to them and zoning codes that apply to them. They're just not. A new generation of adults has spent their entire lives accessing information digitally. We cannot ask them to go backwards. They won't go backwards. They won't be okay with walking into a counter visit, picking up the telephone and calling. I have 3 children under the age of 25, and getting them to pick up a phone to call somebody at their school or in local government or post office delivery companies is it's next to impossible. People expect to be able to access information digitally. And so when designing how your codes and processes work, even though we're government, we want to think like Amazon or other highly successful local retailers in your communities. Think about how they're taking care of their customers. How are they taking care of those users? Answering questions about the code is not a good use of staff time either. This is also a savings for your staff. If we can present information in a way that people can access it themselves, those are questions that we don't have to take time out of our schedules to answer. So I ask you to think about that and think how important it is also for your staff to be able to serve users with what they need. So before we go any further, I would just like to do a quick poll. We're going to ask which role in your offices currently answers constituent questions regarding your zoning code. We want to hear if it's a planner, a zoning official or administrator, a clerk, or other, if it's none of those 3. So we'll take a minute here and go ahead and interact with the poll, which is now open. And we'll take a look and see how we're doing.
And Wayne, this is Jeannie. I would like to encourage anyone who has to say other to maybe put what that role is in the question pod. It'd be just kind of interesting to hear. And we can see some of the results coming in now.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, if it's other, we're taking our best guess at what those roles are. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about assumptions. We've kind of made some assumptions, but I'd love to hear from the people, particularly who say other, what those roles are. Okay, Jeannie, it looks like numbers wise, we should probably have just about everybody represented. Is that right?
I think you are right.
Okay, excellent. So it looks like we have in the lead 62% zoning officials or administrators, 22% planners, 7% are clerks, and 10% is other.
Yeah,
So,
one of the things that came in, Wayne, was all of the above.
yes, you know, what I have found so far is these numbers. What I've seen to date is it really depends on the size of the community and the number and the type of resources the community has available. So it wouldn't surprise me to see some correlation there depending on how you answered with the size of your community. Okay, Jeannie, we ready to move on?
There you have it.
Okay, we shall move on. So what can we do to be more user-centered? We're going to walk through some very specific examples today. First and foremost, it starts with actually adopting a user-centered mission statement. Many of our communities have mission statements, but if we really take a look at them, you'd be surprised at how it's not necessarily user-centered in a very specific way. So mission statements keep everyone on the same page and aligned. You know, a mission statement like the zoning code should achieve the city's future-oriented development goals and make sense to members of the public with little or no planning or development experience. You can see how that was really, really specific about making sure that we explain things in a way to people who aren't, you know, aren't part of our profession or our you know, knowledge areas of expertise. So I ask you to think about that and think if that would make sense for you to really make it clear to your entire staff that it's really very important to your department to help people understand what applies to them. Secondly, we need to fully understand all of our users, their roles, their needs, and especially their pain points. I can't stress how important this is to understand our constituents' pain points, because that will also that will inform us as to not only what are the first things we should work on, the priority things, but often will gain us the most success in having constituents who are satisfied with their user experience with your department or your community. So don't make any assumptions about users' needs. Dig deep to understand their pain points. Consider activities like public engagement workshops, charrettes, surveys. I know in my own community, it's a rather small community. We really went over the top when we you know, created a new comprehensive plan for our community. We had charrettes. It's something that you hear of in larger communities, but it was really well received, and people from very different walks of life in our community participated in the charrettes. And even though people had different opinions on where our community should go, it really went a long way in unifying people on a common vision for our community. Third, adopt work processes to become more user-centered. So process development includes tracking the number and quality of touch points. That's every interaction you have with the community, inbound and outbound communications. So think about forms, applications, any of those inbound, outbound communications. We often do a really good job at our outbound communications. It's easy to get things, you know, organized in a format that you like and presented outward. But we're going to talk a little bit more about it later. But we really want to focus on inbound as well. How can the constituents get back to us? Fourth, collaborating on code content and access ideas with others. So we're talking about the code content itself, sort of what is, how do we actually create the content? So the technical parts of our code to the community, but also the access ideas. How are people getting at it? You want to team up with similar sized communities in your region. Look at how they are solving land use and development challenges. I'll briefly switch over to so I'm going to go over here. if we do things like multi-code searching, I am going to go to my home state of New York, and I'm going to look at towns. I'm going to look within 50 miles of my community's zip code and a similar size population of my town. Let's say less than, let's look at towns less than, 35,000. So I'll add all these towns, and I am going to look at how other communities are dealing with open space in their zoning codes. And if I search on open space, I can return results from town of Milo, town of Ontario dealing with open space, town of Avon, Victor, West Bloomfield, Caledonia. So I can go through these and I can see how other communities of similar size in my region, I can search for them, I can read it myself, but you also want to look at partnering with those people and really understanding the why behind why they did what they did. And lastly, we want to adopt appropriate tools and technology to improve access and clarity of your code. So, it is also about the tools. How are we getting those messages to people? So now we're going to take a look at a very specific template, a very specific process for becoming user-centered. We're going to have multiple topics here. Like this slide is dealing with the code itself, but what we're providing here in the column on the far left of each table is a level of effort. So what we're doing is we're suggesting that there are multiple levels of effort that you can undergo. If you find yourself wanting to do something to improve your zoning code, to make it more user-centered, but you just don't have time, resources, there are small things you can do. And there are, lower level effort, easier things you can do to improve them. And we offer 3 different levels. Revise being the easiest, so this would be your lowest level effort, revise. A reboot would be a little bit more effort, a little more resources. And the reinvent would be a wholesale change, a radical change that will require, more effort, but definitely yields more results. So, your access would say your revise is going to be easier. You maybe not, you won't reap so many rewards, and your reinvent's going to be a lot more effort, but you're definitely going to return more on your effort. So let's take a look at these for the code itself. So adopting minor code amendments to clear up internal conflicts or unanswered questions. We refer to this as an editorial analysis or a zoning audit. You can do this in different ways. Codifiers can help with this. If you're working with a planning consultant, they can help with this. But again, look to partner with people who have that expertise. It's very important to have that second set of eyes taking a look at things. So let's take a look real quickly at, this is an editorial analysis General Code did for a client. We're in the zoning bylaw section. And an example I see right away at the top of the page is the client's current code referred to the Massachusetts Department of Public Works, when actually it should have been the Department of Transportation. So put yourself in that user, if that ordinance had been put out there to the public where that was a reference for them to go to the Massachusetts Department of Public Works, that would be quite confusing and that would waste time, whether it be external or internal. Having that second set of eyes take a look at the code and make sure, because somebody other than you sees those communities that are similar to you. So there are patterns, there are things that different people are used to seeing and can really help you in catching some of those things that you might not pay a lot of attention to, or it may not jump out at you. It really helps to have that second set of eyes. So a reboot would be streamlining procedures in the code, really taking a look at, is any of the information we're asking of people who put in applications, Is it all necessary? Do they really have to fill this all out? Take a very careful look at all of those, any of those unnecessary or cumbersome steps. The next one's big. Add the why to your regulations in the code to help users understand what the city is trying to accomplish. The reason this is important to add the why, if you take the time initially to explain to people why you have certain regulations in place, you will lower the number of questions coming in. It's just the nature of people. If you explain to them why you're doing something, you won't get those questions over and over again. And we're always looking for ways to cut down the amount of time that we spend answering questions or dealing with people who aren't satisfied or not happy. In reInvent, of course, rewriting the entire code to fully align with your user-based mission statement and or major shifts in the community needs, that's always an option. Typically over years, people will have to do that just because our communities change so much. But in the tool category, like we talked before about tools, consider the addition of graphics, illustrations, and tabular presentations of zoning code. So let's take a look at zoning code. What I like to tell people here is a picture is definitely worth 1,000 words. If your zoning code is full of text, not full of images, not full of any illustrations, doesn't have captions with illustrations, diagrams, I really, I would suggest you take a look at that and see what places your code where tabular information might help. We know that accessing information in a table format such as this, especially if we add things like color coding, really really improves the user experience in accessing information. It really helps people understand things like allowable land uses, definitions, really helps them understand it. When we use call outs with illustrations that clearly describe lots, we're using definitions, we're all defining setbacks the same way, dimensional standards the same way. So consider how important these are to communicating your code. Providing captions with photographic examples. This one in particular is a form-based code, so describing form is very important by providing captions, and people can also search on these captions and find photographic examples which will, really help them in understanding your vision for the community. Tables are invaluable. We can communicate a lot of information, color-coded tables. We have color codes for, our different zoning districts. Just a very effective way of communicating information. So I'd really ask you to think about that and think about how you could take some of that text and turn it into pictures, because those pictures are worth 1,000 words. So now let's talk about people for a few minutes. This is actually people, not only the users, but also your staff. So in the revise column, something that would be relatively low effort, consider adding customer effectiveness to employee reviews to establish a formal structure for accountability, and let people know on your staff that taking care of customers and having customer effectiveness or customer satisfaction is really a priority for your department. Make that part of the personnel review process, and keep them accountable to that. It's very important. I'm familiar with a community in Texas that actually had very low scores from their community regarding how helpful and how friendly and how well served they felt. So they took on this initiative, and they've really seen a huge difference. They've seen a huge shift, and they're really doing well because of it. And a lot of it was directed, internally, directly to the staff, and really making that a priority. So you can do that. Rebooting, adopting a customer first attitude and mission statement. We talked about those mission statements before. And be aware of what your messaging is saying. Don't take it for granted. Really think about everything you put out there for the public. Take a look at it and make sure that it comes across as serving them and keeping their needs in mind. And in the re-event, we know that we're facing some pretty tough budgets and some revenue shortfalls right now. But maybe down the road a little bit, you may have to look at the reality of hiring more staff, creating different positions like an ombudsman. You might want to dedicate one person to help resolve disputes. Again, this person would see patterns in, there's a particular section of this code that seems to be tripping up people a lot and causing a lot of the questions. Having that central resource receiving those instead of sort of spreading that across the staff would really help in identifying what are the problem areas. And then you may have to consider some flex hours, flex scheduling to keep offices open after hours. Keep your ears out for those sort of, hints of dissatisfaction or complaints about, are people able to go through their workday and then be able to access their local government? It may be something you need to consider. People are working very different schedules and working really hard these days. So consider maybe offering, one night a week, different hours. Okay, communications. We talked before about, we typically tend to be fairly good about outbound communications, but let's take a look at the inbound. Those would be things like comment forms on your website. Creating how-tos or FAQ resources. Again, let's look at ways to cut down on the amount of time that we're spending answering questions. And I think most of you would agree that these questions tend to be the same questions over and over again. Let's do something about that. Let's take those questions and create those how-tos or FAQ resources to try to cut those off and save your staff time. Let's look at including easy access to code-related documents. So we have our zoning code, but let's take a look at things like posting related documents to the code very near the code. So one of the principles of user-centered design is reducing the number of interactions or clicks, let's say, online. Successful retailers running e-commerce sites use this metric all the time. How many clicks does it take for me to get to something? So if somebody is already looking at your code, let's look to put documents that are closely related to the code that might answer some of those questions. Let's give them a shot. Let's give them a chance of clicking. So here we have public documents right next to our code. So let's take a look at things like comprehensive plans. If we have our comprehensive plans posted, not in separate, department pages in different parts of the municipal code, if we have them co-located with the code, we reduce those number of clicks and we make it far easier for people to take a look at, if we had, our regional strategic plan right here, we can go ahead and take a look at that in a matter of 2 or 3 clicks. That's what we're looking for. Let's reduce the number of clicks required for people to get to information. Let's be proactive in the reboot section. Let's be proactive about press releases. Let's use social media like, Twitter. Let's keep users engaged. Let's let them know what's happening. What are the challenges your department's facing? What are the challenges the community's facing? Let's get out there and be proactive. Let's not wait for the community to come to us. Let's get out to the community. Let's create regular video or podcasts or webinars. A message like a quarterly from the planning director would be great. It helps build your brand. It helps promote the work that your department is doing. A lot of times the community has, and I know this from my time spent as a planning board member, the community has very little idea how much hard work, thought, and planning goes into, running the community and having a vision for the community. We need to share that with people. They need to be part of that. So let's include them and do it proactively. Adding in opt-in notification services. Here's another opportunity to stop questions before they occur, or let people see things that affect them and their property and their neighborhoods before it becomes an issue of any kind. We often see where one unhappy citizen can really affect a lot of citizens around them. They can get to their neighbors. If we have some of these opt-in notification services, it can serve individuals in understanding what's happening to them. So here's a quick look at this is MapLink, our interactive zoning maps. It actually offers, you can sign up for an e-alert. So if you enter your email address and you select your geography, so if we say within a specified distance, I can go down here, I can say, I'll go to the map, let's say my house is right here. I'll say I want to know everything that's happening within 500 feet of my home. I apply now, and anytime there is a development application, anything happening within 500 feet of my home, I can be advised of that. Very similar to if I am in my code. If somebody is really interested in what's happening with their zoning code in their community, they can select their zoning and they can get updates, and they can put their email address in, and anytime your community updates what is in the zoning code, they'll be proactively notified. And we have found that that has really helped people cut down on the number of counter visits, phone calls, if people feel like that there's transparency and they're able to see right away what's affecting them through their code. Let's look at tools, systems, and policies. So if we let applicants and general public know upfront what criteria will be used in evaluating an application, that's far better than keeping that a surprise. Again, it's about transparency. Let's let people know what those criteria are upfront before they apply for anything in the site review process. Rebooting, a little more effort, conducting online public meetings to make them more accessible. So this is, with everything that's gone on with the pandemic, I think many more of you are doing this than you ever did before. So, I would take this one step further and say, how can we make them better? I think many of us are doing these online meetings. I know we've all gotten a lot better at it over the last 8 months or so. Let's keep looking for ways of making that better. Let's look for ways for engagement, like polling. We just took a poll before. Let's see, is there a way to help people bring their input to the public meeting? I know in the board meetings that I'm a part of, it's very difficult if it happens at all. Sometimes we don't even have public comment available. That's really important, and I think the onus is on us to find a way to get that. The technology exists. Let's find a way to make sure that the public can interact with us. And then finally, implementing an online citizen engagement platform. This is, of course, much higher effort, but there are some really great platforms out there for citizen engagement. A lot of planning consultants are familiar with this software. The software they use, when doing things like running charrettes. I spoke about that charrette before. My community underwent. So there's some really good platforms out there specifically designed for engaging the community. And you don't have to do it yourself. So that's going to save you a lot of time and effort. And I showed you just a second ago, but creating another example is creating an online zoning map that links to your zoning code. So here's an interactive zoning map that we offer. Again, being user-centered, people are used to using maps nowadays. They've had mobile devices for quite some time. They're used to Google Maps, Apple Maps. I would say that the general public is far more map savvy than they ever have been before. And at that intersection with more and more communities having good GIS systems to lean on, a really important connection here to make is let's take the text of zoning codes and make it alive through an interactive map. So if I am, let's say I'm coming to this community, I'm a developer, and I want to put in a business. Let's say it's an automotive parts store. With 3 clicks, we talked about this concept of with very few clicks. With 3 clicks, I am now able to see the areas in this community where I can put an automotive parts store. If you think about the process involved to go to a code, to look at a static map, find what zoning district you're in, then read through the text of the code, you're looking, even somebody who's familiar with the code, you're looking at a good 20-minute process there. And we just did it in 3 clicks. You know, again, if I wanted to put in, let's say a restaurant, there we go. We have a different result, literally 2 or 3 clicks. That's what we're looking to do. You know, that's if we're a developer coming to town. If this is about serving a user who already has property in this community, I can put in an address. I can go take a look at my lot, and I can see with a few clicks, I can see very specific elements of the zoning presented to me in my property. I can look at dimensional standards. They're all right here. And that was about, you know, that was a little bit of keystroking and about 5 clicks. And that's far faster than asking somebody who's not particularly used to navigating a zoning code to go look at a map, find where they are, read through the text of the code. This is about being user-centered and really putting the users first and making sure we're presenting the exact same zoning code information. A tool like this doesn't replace the zoning code. It is specifically meant to improve the user experience and make it so that people can access and understand what they need to. Let's have plans and codes translated. Very simple to do things like Google translation of your website. So if we take a look at, we looked at this zoning code before. I was showing you this zoning code. You know, on our code platform, all we're doing is we're tapping into Google Translate. We can, let's say we have a significant portion of our population that's speaking Spanish. With just a click, we can have our code in Spanish, and you can see all the different languages. We really owe this to our citizens. You know, we have a diverse citizenry, and with technology, it is very easy and very inexpensive to, you know, just add some of this functionality that makes it far easier for folks to understand the how the zoning code affects them and their property. So again, take a look at your application forms. Try to make them as short and simple as possible. Make sure we're not asking people to complete fields that don't have much value. Make sure we really need to know what we need to know and that these forms are as easy to use as possible. And as far as reInvent, consider giving your staff more decision-making authority to expedite development reviews. It can be very time-consuming and very frustrating for people to have to wait for approvals. They need to go up the chain, down the chain. Try to find a way in your procedures to change those so that we can empower people who have the time and the ability and the face-to-face interaction with users. Let's give them more authority and allow them to make some of those decisions. As far as public input and engagement, let's accept online payments. If you haven't done that, do that. This is one of the last standing very high level frustrations with citizenry is their municipal governments not accepting online payments. And I'm familiar with governments who have really improved their on-time payments from their community when they go online, because people aren't used to paying their bills through the mail anymore. And local government is one of the last lagging behind there in not accepting those payments. So you'll get much happier people and much better performance in on-time payments with accepting those online payments. And allow for the submission of your application forms online. Let's take that paper and let's change it over to something that allows people to make applications online. Let's save down on visits to the office to get forms. Let's cut down on printing. Again, let's try to catch up with the very best we see from e-commerce companies, and because that's what people are really judging you against. They're judging you against their interactions fairly or unfairly. They're judging their interactions with entities against some of the very best in online commerce. So let's get those application forms done digitally. As far as reinvention, implementing an enterprise-wide online permitting platform. So if we want to go beyond just simple forms, we can go really big. We can offer things like parcel management, so applying for permits, requesting work orders from the community. You're taking a look at Municity 5, which is part of the offerings of ICC's CDS division. The community can request work orders. They can do this all right from their homes. We can manage our building planning, zoning processes like processing of permits, applications online, building inspection records. We can do all of that online. We can also do plan review. So plan review is an area where we really can improve the process. If you think about paperwork, the delays of paperwork going from municipal office to county office, to engineering firms, we can really cut down on the amount of time that development takes by going to a plan review software. So let's take another poll. We're just about ready to start wrapping up. Just curious here, how much time does your staff spend in a week answering zoning code questions? Because we find that many of the people seeking out our solutions, this is the primary driver, is just that answering questions is just sapping their resources. It's just taking way too much time, way too much energy, and it doesn't allow people to focus on what they consider to be their real jobs. We have all kinds of solutions, all kinds of tools, technology, and process changes we can make to cut down on this amount of time. So the results are coming in. It looks like the majority is in the 2 to 10 hours a week, but a real close second is 10 to 20 hours a week. So we're showing, wow, and now the more than 20 hours is growing. If you're spending, I mean, just think about that, half of your week you're spending answering zoning questions, we've got to find a solution. We absolutely have to find a solution. Jeannie, were there any insights other than what we have here shared? Any comments or anything? I just asked because when I do demonstrations on some of these solutions, I often get some pretty frustrated people. So I was just wondering if anyone went out of their way to throw something in the question pod.
No, not so far.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you all for sharing. Wow, those are some big numbers and those are some big hours spent answering questions. So let's go to wrapping this up. So our lessons learned today. We've really learned that we have to maintain a user-centered focus. Governments everywhere are moving toward a user-centered design. Partnering with others is huge. Let's tap into the knowledge of others around you. That can be technology partners. It can be communities around you of similar size, of similar geography. It can be consultants, but definitely partner with others. It really helps to have perspectives outside of your own. It's really easy to get frustrated and stuck in what you've always known in your community. Make sure you're reaching out to people and you're capitalizing on other people's knowledge. Another very, very important point today is know your users and their needs. Don't make assumptions. It is very important to understand their pain points. Unfortunately, sometimes those pain points are because of us. And it's very important that we understand what those are. And like I said before, you can see patterns. It's sometimes what feels like this huge problem with your community can really be limited to just a few touch points. Just a few things that with a focused effort, we can address these things and have a huge improvement in how people feel about working with us. Another important point is measuring your results. So after you've implemented some of these plans for either small improvements or large improvements we can make in making zoning codes more user-centered, the next step after we've implemented something and we start to see some results is we have to measure those results because we never want to stop improving. Return on investment analysis can be difficult and time consuming, but it's well worth it because it helps you get other people working towards shared goals. If you can show that, putting effort into improving your processes, let's say implementing online forms. You implement online forms, or you enable people to get notifications. You invest in that. You want to measure the results, things like customer satisfaction or time cut down answering questions, time cut down, people doing walk-in visits. Like right now in the pandemic, we can't have walk-in visits. We all have to cut down on that amount of interaction we're having physically, if your office is even open at all. So when we take one of these small steps, we improve a process, we improve a tool, we really have to take the time to measure the results so that we can keep our momentum going and address the next problem that we encounter, and keep everybody working together and share some of your successes. Make sure other people know the hard work that your department is doing. So Jeannie, we will go ahead and open up the question pod now. See if we have any questions about anything we've talked about today. We've reserved some time here. We have 10 minutes left in our session to answer any questions. I certainly will stay on longer with anybody who wishes to stay on longer, but let's see what we have, Jeannie.
Actually, you do have some questions. So a comment just came in that I thought was really timely. And Leslie's writing, the language is very important that the code says what it means and what it says unambiguously. So really making sure that our codes are straightforward.
Yes.
People want to know, somebody's got, Barbara has a question about MapLink when you were showing the interactive zoning map. So what her question is she was looking at you sort of zeroing in on a certain area to get updates. And she's wondering, can you get a list of the neighbors within 500 feet of your house? Can it provide that?
In that particular tool I just showed, that was for notifications of that was for applications. So it's
right. So if somebody put a permit up or requested a permit or how it was, okay.
Exactly. As far as those neighbors, you can, if your community, if you have a MapLink site, you can certainly, you can see all of those properties. You can click on those properties and see that property owner info. If that community displays property owner info, you'll see all the addresses. But we do have it in our development queue to offer that, because we do know that it's part of the job responsibilities of many people who are providing zoning information, things like abutters notifications. It's actually in the development queue to take that same kind of notice and put it in a way that people can simply get an abutters list. That's in the development queue. But that was the applications, that was a really big one. We did that one first.
Joanne is asking, do small clarifications of code usually require legislative approval?
Small clarifications of code. So we actually have no, okay? We actually have a really good example. Let me flip over real quick. I am going to show you commentary is a common way that we can clarify code without being code information. So for my own use, let's switch back to English here so I don't get lost.
Upper left-hand corner, I always miss it.
Got it. I'm looking in the E's. Okay, so if I go to zoning code, one of our clients in Illinois did a really nice job of providing commentary. Now, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. See this section right here where it says commentary. Commentary in established neighborhoods where the front building setback line is determined. This is not code information. We actually provided the functionality in their E-code for them to enter commentary, which is not part of the code. So it does not have to be passed. And we're seeing this a lot more. This is becoming a lot more common where we're offering things through like the ability to put notes in. Communities can put notes directly into their E-code and make it very clear that this is just clarification or commentary. This is not actually an ordinance as passed. If that is all, I would like to thank you all very much for spending your valuable time today with us. It was a pleasure putting this on. Please feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to have follow-up conversations with anything you saw today. And again, I'd like to thank you all. Have a great day.